Welcome to the second episode in a Legendarium series about the Roman conquest of Britain. In Part 2, Caesar's Invasion, we will be talking about how the Romans saw Britain as an island full of terrifying men and fantastic sights. Julius Caesar made 2 invasion attempts of Britain, both of which failed. However, Roman merchants and trade goods did far more to Romanize Britain than Julius Caesar ever did. When the Romans first saw the English Channel, they thought they had discovered an ocean they called the Mare Britannica. And while the Romans knew that there was some island north of the Mare Britannicum, they imagined it as a savage land where priests sacrificed terrible numbers of humans by locking them up in timber man-shaped frames before setting them alight as human bonfires. This in time would become the likely source of the legend of the Wicker Man. The Romans also imagined Britain as a place where men walked around with no clothes on, painted themselves blue, and worst of all, they drank milk. In truth, small Iron Age communities tilled the land in Britain and lived within enclosed settlements. Henges of wood and stone served as focal points both for religious worship and the study of the moon and sun. Minor kings ruled from hill forts. And the people of southern Britain were of Belgae descent, trading timber and surplus wheat to the Belgae on the continent in exchange for wine and gold, the latter of which they made into coins. When Julius Caesar began conquering Gaul in the 50s BC, he went to war against the Belgae, who were financed in part by their cousins in Britain. So Julius Caesar decided to invade Britain, not only to disrupt the Belgae trade routes, but also hunt down a possible source of silver. In 55 BC, Caesar made his first attempt to invade the island. He crossed the Channel and pushed northward across the Thames River. There he met the Briton chieftain Cassivellaunus in battle. The two fought briefly, but ultimately the coming of winter weather forced Caesar to make a hasty peace treaty with Cassivellaunus. After all, if Caesar didn't get back to Gaul before winter weather kicked in, he would be marooned on the island for a year. Caesar did indeed make it back to Gaul, and he spent the rest of the year planning a second campaign for 54 BC. Caesar used Veneti shipbuilding techniques to build 600 new transports and 28 warships within a matter of months that were better suited for the rough waters around Britannia. Caesar also bolstered his army by recruiting cavalry from among the Gaelic nations, more than doubling the size of his previous invasion force. When Caesar came the second time, he landed unopposed, established camp, and sent out scouts in search of Cassivellaunus. Caesar soon learned that Cassivellaunus assembled an army to oppose him and hurried out of his camp to confront the Briton warlord at his hill fort. Caesar quickly surrounded Cassivellaunus's hill fort and began to build ramparts so his soldiers could scale the walls. However, Cassivellaunus's Britons simply vanished into the woods. Wary of sending his men into unfamiliar country at night, Caesar instead passed the night in the hill fort, and when he awoke, Caesar learned that a storm had wrecked many of his ships. So Caesar ordered his men to not only begin repairing the ships, but to construct a wall that would protect them as he worked. Meanwhile, Caesar also sent out an advance guard to keep the Britons away from his fort. However, Roman patrols were harassed constantly by Briton warriors fighting in chariots, using hit-and-run tactics in the forest to break up Roman lines. As you can see, Cassivellaunus was a veteran warrior. However, the many wars and feuds that Cassivellaunus fought against his fellow Britons to earn this great skill had left him with many enemies in Britain. The Trin of Nantes, one of those enemies, came to Caesar's rescue, meeting him on the river Thames and promising to fight with him against their common enemy Cassivellaunus. Most importantly, the Trin of Nantes provided Caesar with knowledge of the land and the location of Cassivellaunus's second hill fort. Caesar headed straight to the second hill fort and began burning villages around his enemy's fortification, hoping to draw out Cassivellaunus. Instead, Cassivellaunus sued for peace, giving up hostages and tribute in exchange for Caesar leaving the island. Caesar agreed and went back to Gaul. It is hard to see Caesar's invasion as a victory, as no Roman presence remained in the British Isles. Yet, many Romans were very enthusiastic about Caesar's incursion into this fabled land. Caesar wrote extensively about the so-called exotic land of hill forts and druids, describing human sacrifice supposedly performed by the high priests. In the first written account of Britannia, Caesar claimed, "All the Britons dye themselves with woad. They wear their hair long and shave all their bodies with the exception of their heads and upper lips. Wives are shared between groups of 10 or 12 men, especially between brothers and between fathers and sons." Of course, Caesar could have just been indulging in a bit of sensationalism to sell his British campaign. It would be almost a century before another Roman chose to invade Britain. Now, while Caesar had failed to conquer Britain, Roman trade goods were now more available than ever to the British because the Romans controlled the Channel coast in France, only a few dozen miles from the British coast. So the Britons were more exposed to Roman trade and Roman influence than ever before. Britain chieftains grew especially fond of the vast number of consumer products that Roman merchants offered. If a time traveler walked into the house of a Briton chieftain in the century following Caesar's invasion, they would have seen a grand display of all things Roman. They would have seen textiles, wine, beads, and some of the greater chieftains would have even minted gold coins in the style of the Roman Republic. Indeed, powerful Britons prized these Roman goods so much that they joined them in their journey to the next world as grave goods. Local kings in southern Britannia even allied with the Roman Republic, and then used them as allies against their Briton neighbors. Some clan leaders even sent their children to Rome for education. So while Caesar failed to conquer the Britons, the endless delights and advantages offered by the friendship of the Roman Republic went a long way towards Romanizing Britain. And that wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you saw, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.